The principal banned her from school grounds without knowing she had quietly saved the entire district from bankruptcy, just like her own grandmother had saved her from the segregated schools of 1950s Alabama. 74-year-old Dr. Constance Washington stood at the chain-link fence of Lincoln Elementary School on that cold February morning, watching her 8-year-old great-granddaughter Jasmine struggle with her backpack. The security guard approached for the second time, his voice firm. "Ma'am, unaccompanied adults aren't allowed on school property during school hours." Principal Richardson had been watching the elderly black woman for weeks now. At 42, he prided himself on maintaining strict security at Lincoln Elementary, especially in East Cleveland, where most families qualified for free lunch. This woman appeared regularly, sometimes at morning drop-off, sometimes during recess, always watching the children with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Today, he decided to handle it personally. What Richardson didn't know was that the woman he viewed as a potential threat had been the invisible lifeline keeping his school alive for 7 years. Dr. Washington had earned her doctorate in educational leadership from Case Western Reserve University in 1978, when black women earning PhDs were rarer than snow in summer. She'd spent 47 years transforming failing schools in Detroit, Cleveland, and Atlanta, but nothing had prepared her for watching her own great-granddaughter struggle in an underfunded system. The irony cut deep. Dr. Washington had grown up in rural Selma, Alabama, where her grandmother Mama Ruby cleaned white folks' houses by day and taught neighborhood children to read by lamplight at night. "Baby girl," Mama Ruby used to say, running her weathered fingers through young Constance's hair. "Education is the only thing they can't take away from you. You remember that." Those words had carried her through segregated schools where textbooks had missing pages and classrooms had no heat in winter. In 1963, when she was 19 and watching the Birmingham protests on her dormitory television, Constance had made a promise to herself. No child would ever suffer in underfunded schools if she had the power to stop it. That promise had shaped every decision since: her career in urban education, her consulting business that made her wealthy, and now her anonymous philanthropy that had pumped nearly $2 million into Lincoln Elementary over 7 years. The misunderstanding had started innocently. Dr. Washington had moved to East Cleveland 6 months ago to help her granddaughter Keisha, a single mother working double shifts as a nursing assistant. Keisha's husband had died in Iraq in 2019, leaving her to raise Jasmine alone while battling her own grief and financial struggles. When Jasmine started having nightmares and falling behind in reading, Dr. Washington knew she had to act. Her observations of Lincoln Elementary had revealed both promise and problems. The teachers were dedicated. Mrs. Patterson reminded her of her own third-grade teacher, Miss Johnson, who'd made sure every child could read before Christmas. But the resources were stretched thin, just like in the Detroit schools she'd rescued in the 1980s. Books were outdated, class sizes too large, and the after-school tutoring that struggling readers desperately needed had been cut due to budget constraints. That's when Dr. Washington had quietly stepped in, the way she'd been doing for decades. Working through her attorney and a carefully structured foundation, she'd begun providing anonymous funding disguised as federal grants and corporate sponsorships. The music program came back first. She remembered how singing had saved her sanity during those lonely years as the only black student in her graduate program. Then came new textbooks, computers, and salary support that kept 5 veteran teachers from being laid off. Principal Richardson had no idea that his reputation for miracle fundraising was built on Dr. Washington's generosity. He'd presented at conferences about beating the odds in urban education, genuinely believing his administrative skills had attracted the resources that transformed Lincoln Elementary. The irony wasn't lost on Dr. Washington. She'd helped create his success story while remaining invisible. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from school property," Richardson said as he approached the fence that Tuesday morning. His tone was professional but firm. "We have policies about unauthorized adults observing children. If you have business here, you need to check in at the main office." Dr. Washington turned to face him, immediately recognizing the protective instincts driving his actions, the same instincts that had made her lock down schools during her years as a principal in Detroit. "I understand your concern, Principal Richardson," she replied, reading his name badge. "I'm watching my great-granddaughter during recess, Jasmine Williams, in Mrs. Patterson's third-grade class. I recently moved here to help my family." Richardson's expression softened slightly upon learning she was a family member, but policies were policies. "I appreciate your concern for your great-granddaughter, but all visitors must register at the main office and receive visitor badges. This protects all our students and staff." The conversation that followed was civil, but tense. "Doctor." Washington explained her desire to ensure Jasmine's successful transition to the school, while Richardson maintained that security protocols applied to everyone, regardless of good intentions. Neither realized they were having a conversation that would soon expose 7 years of hidden philanthropy and transform both their lives. Standing at that fence, Dr. Washington thought about Mama Ruby, who'd been banned from the white school when she'd tried to enroll Constance in first grade back in 1949. "They don't want us here, baby girl," Mama Ruby had said, holding 6-year-old Constance's hand as they walked away from the whites-only school. "But someday, you'll walk into places they never dreamed you could go." Now, 65 years later, history seemed to be repeating itself with a cruel twist. The woman being excluded from school grounds was the same person whose anonymous donations had saved it from state takeover. The security measures funded by her generosity were being used to keep her away from the great-granddaughter she was trying to protect. Richardson provided Dr. Washington with the main office contact information and explained the visitor registration process. As she walked away from the fence, Jasmine spotted her through the playground fence and waved sadly. The little girl didn't understand why great-grandmama Connie couldn't watch her play anymore, and Dr. Washington's heart broke, knowing that her attempts to help had somehow created distance from the child she loved most. That evening, Dr. Washington sat in her modest apartment looking at old photographs from her educational career, receiving her doctorate in 1978, the first black woman principal in Detroit's history. Retirement ceremonies where colleagues thanked her for impossible fundraising successes. In every photo, she saw the same pattern: helping from the shadows, achieving through others, remaining invisible while creating change. The next morning, she would call Lincoln Elementary to schedule the formal meeting that Principal Richardson had suggested. But she had no idea that by the time that meeting took place, a dedicated teacher's curiosity and a grant writer's investigation would unravel the carefully constructed anonymity that had protected her philanthropy for 7 years. Dr. Washington's journey into anonymous giving had begun in 1963, watching 9 black students walk into Little Rock Central High School on television, while her own college classmates shouted racial slurs at the screen. That night, she'd written in her diary, "Someday, I'll make sure no child has to fight just to learn." It was a promise that shaped the next 60 years of her life, from teaching in Detroit's most challenging schools to quietly funding programs that gave children hope. The memory that drove her philanthropy wasn't from her professional career. It was from 3rd grade in Selma, when her teacher, Miss Annie Johnson, spent her own grocery money to buy books for students whose families couldn't afford them. "Knowledge is power, baby," Miss Johnson would whisper, slipping extra worksheets into Constance's worn book bag. "And power can lift your whole family up." When Miss Johnson died of a heart attack at 43, still unmarried and pouring her teacher's salary into her students' futures, young Constance vowed to continue her legacy. The path from that segregated classroom to Case Western Reserve University hadn't been easy. Dr. Washington's father worked 3 jobs: janitor at the courthouse, mechanic at night, and farmhand on weekends, while her mother took in laundry and cleaned houses for white families. "Education costs money we don't have," her father would say, counting bills by lamplight. But Mama Ruby, who'd raised 12 children and seen most of them trapped in poverty, had different plans for her brightest granddaughter. "This child's going to college if I have to wash every white woman's underwear in Alabama," Mama Ruby declared when Constance graduated valedictorian from Selma's segregated high school in 1962. True to her word, Mama Ruby worked extra shifts cleaning the Baptist church and sold her prized quilt collection to help pay Constance's first-year tuition. The sacrifice was enormous. Mama Ruby had sewn those quilts during her husband's long illness, each one a masterpiece that could have been sold for far more than she received. Dr. Washington's graduate school years at Case Western were lonely and challenging in ways that went beyond academics. She was often the only black student in her classes, enduring professors who questioned her intelligence and classmates who acted like she was invisible. During her lowest moments, she'd remember Mama Ruby's words. "Baby girl, when they try to make you small, you just shine brighter. That's how we change the world, one light at a time." The consulting business that made her wealthy had grown from her reputation for transforming failing schools. Educational excellence. Solutions began in her Detroit apartment in 1985 when desperate superintendents started calling her for advice on everything from curriculum development to community engagement. Her methods were unconventional but effective. She'd move into struggling neighborhoods, attend PTA meetings, shop at local grocery stores, and understand the community's heartbeat before suggesting changes. By the 1990s, her training programs were being licensed by universities nationwide, and school districts paid six-figure fees for her consultation. But success felt hollow when she'd drive past underfunded schools on her way to wealthy districts that could afford her services. That's when she started the anonymous giving, first small amounts to buy supplies, then larger contributions to save programs, eventually the sophisticated philanthropy that sustained entire districts. Lincoln Elementary had captured her attention through a heartbreaking newspaper article in 2017 about budget cuts eliminating art and music programs. The photo that haunted her showed 8-year-old children sitting in an empty library, their confused faces reflecting the adult world's failure to protect their education. She'd clipped that photo and kept it on her desk, a reminder of why her work mattered. If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson had been teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary for 28 years, long enough to remember when the school had a full-time librarian, art teacher, and music instructor. She'd watched budget cuts slowly strip away everything that made learning joyful, leaving dedicated teachers like herself to fill gaps that grew wider each year. When she noticed Jasmine Williams becoming withdrawn after the Tuesday incident with her great-grandmother, Mrs. Patterson's maternal instincts kicked in. The phone call to Jasmine's mother, Keisha, happened Wednesday evening, during the brief window between Keisha's hospital shift and her evening cleaning job. "Jasmine seems upset about something involving her great-grandmother," Mrs. Patterson explained gently. She mentioned that great-grandmama Connie was sad about not being able to watch her at recess anymore. Keisha's explanation of her grandmother's background made Mrs. Patterson's pulse quicken. "Dr. Constance Washington?" she repeated, the name triggering a memory she couldn't quite place. "What did you say she did before retirement?" As Keisha described her grandmother's doctorate from Case Western, her decades transforming urban schools, and her nationally recognized consulting business, Mrs. Patterson felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together. She'd been teaching long enough to recognize when coincidences weren't really coincidences. That night, Mrs. Patterson stayed late in her classroom, searching through old educational journals she kept for professional development. In a 2018 issue of Educational Leadership magazine, she found what she was looking for: a feature article about successful urban education reform, with a photo of Dr. Constance Washington receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. The woman in the photograph was unmistakably the same person who'd been standing at their school fence on Tuesday morning. The discovery prompted Mrs. Patterson to call Janet Morrison, the district's grant writer, early Thursday morning. "Janet, I think we may have had a very special visitor this week, and I'm wondering if there might be connections we haven't considered to some of our recent funding successes." Janet Morrison had been writing grants for Lincoln Elementary for 6 years, celebrating every small victory in a field where rejections outnumbered approvals 10-1. When Mrs. Patterson described Dr. Washington's credentials and national reputation, Morrison felt a strange mixture of curiosity and concern. Something about the timing felt significant, but she couldn't pinpoint why. Morrison's investigation began with a simple question. Had Dr. Washington or Educational Excellence Solutions ever been connected to any of their funding sources? What she discovered over the next several hours would shake her understanding of the past 7 years and force her to confront uncomfortable questions about professional success she'd thought she'd earned. The breakthrough came when Morrison called the Federal Education Office that had allegedly provided funding for their music program restoration. After being transferred 3 times, she spoke with an official who expressed genuine confusion about the grant she was referencing. "Ma'am, I've been coordinating arts education funding for this region for 8 years, the official said. We have no record of any grant to Lincoln Elementary School District. Similar calls to corporate sponsors and educational foundations revealed the same pattern: confusion, missing records, and no knowledge of the partnerships Morrison believed she'd successfully established. Each conversation deepened her growing realization that the district's financial stability had been maintained through sources that existed only in her grant reports and the district's accounting records. The scope of the phantom funding was staggering. Over 7 years, nearly $2 million had flowed into the district through sources that couldn't be verified or traced to legitimate external organizations. The money had saved 5 teaching positions, restored eliminated programs, and provided resources that had transformed Lincoln Elementary from a struggling school facing state intervention to a model of urban education success. Thursday afternoon's meeting between Dr. Washington and Principal Richardson was scheduled for 3:15, but the revelation that would change everything came 2 hours earlier when Janet Morrison burst into Richardson's office with documentation that defied explanation. "Martin, we need to talk about something that's going to sound impossible," she said, spreading grant files across his desk. "I think our mystery visitor might be connected to funding that's kept this district alive." Richardson's initial reaction was disbelief. "Are you suggesting that an anonymous donor has been supporting our district without our knowledge?" The legal and ethical implications were staggering, but Morrison's research was thorough and undeniable. Phone call after phone call had confirmed that funding sources they'd relied on for years simply didn't exist in the organizations they'd supposedly come from. "Martin, Dr. Constance Washington is one of the most respected names in urban education reform," Morrison continued, showing him the educational leadership article Mrs. Patterson had found. "Her consulting firm has generated millions in revenue, and she's known for her philanthropic work. The timing of her appearance in our community correlates exactly with when our funding challenges were mysteriously resolved." The principal found himself grappling with a reality that redefined his understanding of his own professional success. Every conference presentation he'd given about beating the odds, every commendation he'd received for maintaining program quality despite budget constraints had been built on a foundation of anonymous support he'd never acknowledged or even known existed. Dr. Washington arrived at Lincoln Elementary 15 minutes early, dressed in the same navy blue suit she'd worn to receive her Lifetime Achievement Award in 2018. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, professional enough to command respect, modest enough to avoid any appearance of condescension. Her goal was to focus on Jasmine's educational needs while maintaining the anonymity that had protected her philanthropy for decades. The meeting began with Richardson's genuine appreciation for Dr. Washington's expertise and her obvious commitment to educational excellence. Their discussion of Jasmine's academic assessment results revealed the depth of Dr. Washington's understanding of child development and learning theory. Her questions about curriculum standards and teaching methodologies reflected decades of professional experience and authentic concern for her great-granddaughter's future. "Dr. Washington," Richardson said after 20 minutes of educational discussion, "your insights have been invaluable, and I can see that Jasmine is fortunate to have your guidance. I wonder if I might ask you about something else that's come to our attention today." The careful way Richardson approached the funding questions told Dr. Washington that her anonymity had been compromised. Decades of institutional leadership had prepared her for moments when private motivations intersected with public responsibilities, and she recognized that transparency was now necessary for everyone's benefit. "Principal Richardson," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had characterized her career. "I believe you're about to ask me about financial support that this district has received over the past several years. If that's the case, then yes, it's time for complete honesty about my relationship with Lincoln Elementary and the broader educational community here." The admission transformed the atmosphere in Richardson's office completely. The principal, who had spent 24 hours questioning his own achievements, now faced the reality of sitting across from someone whose generosity had literally saved his school district from potential collapse and state intervention. Dr. Washington's explanation of her philanthropic philosophy revealed the sophisticated thinking that had guided 7 years of strategic giving. She had chosen anonymity not to avoid recognition, but to ensure that her contributions would be evaluated based on their educational impact rather than their source. Her experience in urban education had taught her that external funding often came with expectations that could compromise local autonomy and community ownership. "I learned from watching the civil rights movement that the most sustainable change comes from within communities, not from outside saviors," Dr. Washington explained. "My goal was to provide a stable foundation that would allow educators like yourself to focus on teaching and learning rather than crisis management. The programs my funding supported needed to become self-sustaining through your own efforts and community investment." Richardson's understanding of his professional trajectory shifted as Dr. Washington outlined the scope of her support. The music program that had become a source of pride, the veteran teachers whose experience had been crucial for maintaining quality, the after-school tutoring that had improved outcomes for hundreds of students, all had been made possible by this woman's quiet intervention. Mrs. Patterson joined the meeting during its final 30 minutes, bringing her 28 years of classroom experience and detailed knowledge of Jasmine's academic needs. The conversation among the 3 educators revealed possibilities that went far beyond resolving the immediate misunderstanding about Dr. Washington's presence at the school. "Dr. Washington," Mrs. Patterson said, "Jasmine isn't the only student who could benefit from your expertise. We have 43 third graders who are reading below grade level, and many of them come from families facing the same challenges that Keisha navigates as a single mother." The proposal that emerged from their discussion involved transitioning Dr. Washington's relationship with the district from anonymous benefactor to acknowledged community partner. Her consulting expertise could help develop sustainable funding strategies, while her continued financial support could bridge the gap between current resources and long-term sustainability. Dr. Washington's acceptance of this new role reflected her understanding that true educational transformation required more than anonymous funding. It needed community engagement, professional collaboration, and transparent partnerships that could inspire others to invest in children's futures. The immediate plan they developed included establishing Dr. Washington as an official educational consultant to the district, creating transparent funding mechanisms that could attract additional community support, and developing programs that would serve not just Jasmine, but all students who needed additional academic support. 6 months after that transformative Thursday afternoon meeting, Lincoln Elementary School District held its first annual community education celebration in the renovated gymnasium that Dr. Washington's final anonymous contribution had made possible. The event brought together 300 community members, including parents who had never attended school events, local business owners who had never considered educational partnerships, and civic leaders who had never recognized the district's potential for excellence. Dr. Washington stood at the podium that evening, looking out at faces that represented every segment of East Cleveland's diverse community. Her keynote address began with memories of Mama Ruby, whose sacrifice had made everything possible. "My grandmother cleaned houses for 50 cents a day so I could attend college," she said, her voice carrying across the packed gymnasium. She died never seeing the fruits of her investment, but every child who benefits from education today honors her memory. The speech that followed reflected on the journey from segregated schools in Alabama to integrated classrooms in Ohio, from being the only black student in graduate school to becoming a nationally recognized leader in educational reform. But the heart of her message focused on collective responsibility for ensuring that every child, regardless of economic circumstances, had access to quality education. Education is not about individual achievement, Dr. Washington told the assembled community. It's about creating opportunities for every child to discover their potential and contribute to the strength of their community. When we invest in children's education, we invest in our own future. The celebration concluded with the announcement of the Lincoln Elementary Community Foundation, a new organization that would continue supporting innovative programs throughout the district. Dr. Washington's initial contribution of $500,000 was matched by commitments from local businesses, parent organizations, and community groups, creating a sustainable funding model for future educational excellence. The Foundation's first initiative was the Mama Ruby Reading Program, named in honor of Dr. Washington's grandmother and designed to provide intensive literacy support for struggling readers. The program combined individual tutoring, family engagement, and community volunteer training to address reading challenges at their source while building community capacity for supporting student success. Jasmine Williams, now 9 years old and reading at grade level, served as the program's first student ambassador. Her transformation from a struggling reader dealing with family trauma to a confident student excited about learning illustrated the power of combining family support, community investment, and educational expertise. Principal Richardson's leadership continued to receive recognition at educational conferences, but his presentations now included honest acknowledgement of the community partnerships and philanthropic support that had made Lincoln Elementary's success possible. His collaboration with Dr. Washington had deepened his understanding of educational leadership and prepared him to advocate more effectively for adequate public funding of urban education. Mrs. Patterson's classroom became a laboratory for innovative teaching strategies developed through her ongoing consultation with Dr. Washington. The veteran teacher's collaboration with someone of Dr. Washington's expertise enhanced her own professional development while providing direct benefits for all her students. The ripple effects of Dr. Washington's revealed philanthropy extended beyond Lincoln Elementary to inspire similar community investments throughout East Cleveland. 3 additional schools received major donations from community members who had been motivated by her example, and 2 local businesses established scholarship programs for college-bound students. Keisha Williams completed her associate degree in nursing with financial support from the Community Foundation's Adult Education Initiative. Her success as a single mother balancing education, employment, and parenting responsibilities inspired other parents to pursue their own educational goals while supporting their children's academic achievement. The transformation of Dr. Washington's relationship with Lincoln Elementary from anonymous benefactor to acknowledged community leader created a model for sustainable educational philanthropy that preserved both community autonomy and external support. Her approach demonstrated that effective educational change requires long-term commitment, strategic thinking, and deep respect for the expertise and dignity of the communities being served. Dr. Washington's office in the renovated community center became a gathering place for educators, parents, and community leaders working to ensure that Lincoln Elementary's success could be replicated throughout the region. Her mentorship of young teachers, guidance for struggling students, and advocacy for adequate educational funding created a legacy that extended far beyond financial contributions. The annual celebration became an anticipated community event that showcased student achievements, recognized volunteer contributions, and renewed commitments to educational excellence. Each year's program included presentations by students whose lives had been transformed by the resources and opportunities that strategic community investment had made possible. 3 years after the fence incident that had nearly excluded her from school grounds, Dr. Washington was awarded the Key to the City of East Cleveland in recognition of her contributions to educational excellence and community development. The ceremony took place at Lincoln Elementary, in the same gymnasium where she had once been viewed as a security threat. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. The story of Dr. Constance Washington and Lincoln Elementary School District illustrates the profound impact that strategic philanthropy can have when combined with community engagement and transparent partnership. Her journey from being banned from school grounds to being celebrated as the district's most important community partner demonstrates the complex relationships between individual generosity, institutional needs, and sustainable community development. Most importantly, this story reminds us that educational success is measured not in test scores or administrative achievements, but in opportunities created for every child to reach their potential. Dr. Washington's legacy extends far beyond the money she contributed. It encompasses the culture of excellence, community engagement, and shared responsibility for student success that her involvement helped establish and sustain. Her story echoes the voices of countless educators and community leaders who understand that true change comes from those willing to invest not just their resources, but their time, expertise, and hearts in the futures of children they may never meet, but whose success determines the strength of communities they all share.